The Ophanim, the celestial wheels, make precisely 23 appearances within the canonical texts of the Bible. Despite this specific frequency, these entities remain virtually unknown to the vast majority of Christians. These terrifying, kinetic structures, which the prophet describes as entirely covered in eyes and moving with a chaotic logic that utterly defies the known laws of terrestrial physics, materialize during some of the most profound and unsettling prophetic encounters ever chronicled. The truly astonishing realization is this: these beings are not demons or fallen entities. They are holy servants, integral components of God's own divine throne room. Yet, their very appearance is so overwhelmingly terrifying that without exception, every single biblical witness records humanity immediately collapsing into a state of paralyzed, existential dread upon seeing them. We are about to delve into the entirety of what Scripture unveils about these enigmatic, hidden beings, and examine the critical reasons why their true, formidable nature has been largely excised from mainstream Christian understanding. But first, if you appreciate this kind of deep theological exploration, please consider supporting the channel by hitting the like button and subscribing. It truly helps us continue this work. Thank you for joining me today. As is tradition, I am eager to know where you are tuning in from. Please take a moment to introduce yourselves in the comments below. Tell us your location and the time it is there. This small act truly reinforces the sense of global community that we are fostering here. So, without further delay, let us begin our journey. The encounter of Ezekiel, a revelation of the divine chariot, the Merkabah. The prophet Ezekiel is seated in profound stillness by the river. The specific year is 593 B.C.E. He is resting among his fellow exiles beside the flow of the Khabar or Chebar, a major canal that traverses Babylonian territory near the ancient, sacred city of Nippur. He waits, perhaps entrenched in prayer, perhaps consumed by utter despair. The great temple in Jerusalem is now a ghost of a memory, miles behind him. The high priesthood he trained for now seems nothing more than a fading, unreachable dream. Suddenly, the firmament itself is violently ripped open. A massive, cataclysmic storm descends from the north. Wind shrieks across the vast, desolate flatlands. Fire crackles intensely within a gargantuan cloud, which pulses unervingly with a core of living amber light. The very air around him seems to buckle and distort. Ezekiel is utterly transfixed. He cannot divert his gaze. Something colossal and immense is mobilizing within that storm, an entity approaching through dimensions his human intellect struggles desperately to comprehend. For monumental figures emerge from this blinding brilliance. At a fleeting first glance, they might seem vaguely humanoid, but that superficial similarity vanishes immediately. Each creature possesses 4 faces turned outward, granting them total, simultaneous vision in all directions. A human visage gazes forward. The terrifying snarl of a lion turns to the right. The steadfast gaze of an ox stares to the left. An eagle's focused eye watches perpetually from behind. Massive wings spread from their bodies, 2 colossal pairs for each being. One pair extends high overhead, the tips touching the wings of the creatures flanking them, thereby forming a unified, crystal canopy. The other pair remains lowered, covering their immediate bodies. Beneath the wings, capable and purposeful human hands reach out. Their legs descend straight downward, yet their feet shine like burnished bronze, shaped not like human feet but like the cloven hooves of calves. They move without ever having to turn. Each creature advances straight ahead in whichever direction its 4 faces point. Bright, living fire dances between the creatures, shooting forth erratically as lightning. The beings flash back and forth, their movements so terrifyingly swift and instantaneous that Ezekiel's eyes can barely track their existence. These are the cherubim, although Ezekiel does not yet assign them the title. Later, in his 10th chapter, he will finally recognize them as the potent guardians of divine holiness, the beings stationed at the entrance of Eden's gate, the very figures whose carved images decorated the Ark of the Covenant. But here, beside the waters of the Khabar, he first encounters them in their full, overwhelming, glorious reality. Then, Ezekiel registers the most profoundly alien element, that which accompanies the living creatures. Beside each cherub, resting upon the earth, a structure appears. It is called a wheel. Yet, to use the word wheel feels like a gross and criminal understatement, akin to describing the deepest ocean as a mere basin of water. These structures immediately defy any simple, terrestrial nomenclature. They shimmer and gleam like the terrifying beauty of chrysolite, often identified as the Tarsish stone. A golden green, ethereal gem that catches the light and fractures it in blinding, impossible ways. Every wheel shares this identical, inexplicable composition and construction. Crucially, the wheels intersect. One enormous wheel is perfectly situated within another orthogonally, at a perfect right angle, creating a complex, spinning sphere that can instantly roll in any of the 6 possible directions simultaneously: north, south, east, west, up, and down. This motion requires no physical reorientation, no pivot, no mechanical pause to change trajectory. The wheels simply move exactly where the driving spirit dictates, tracking the movements of the cherubim with absolute, flawless synchronicity. But it is the rims, the vast circumferences, that hold the true terror, the sight that chokes the breath in Ezekiel's throat. Eyes, innumerable, uncountable eyes. The entire, sweeping surface of each rim is completely saturated, filled top to bottom with observing eyes. They are perpetually open. They never blink. They miss nothing, recording and cataloging every fraction of existence within their collective purview. These eyes do not merely scan the visible world. They seem to penetrate through density, seeing past surfaces into the hidden realms where secrets and unspoken thoughts reside. The sheer height of the wheels dramatically surpasses any normal human scale. Their rims reach impossibly high, evoking a terrifying mixture of reverence and paralyzing fear in equal measure. When the living creatures shift, the wheels move exactly in lockstep. When the creatures elevate themselves from the ground, the wheels lift with them, maintaining an unwavering, precise alignment. The prophet grasps a deeper truth. The very spirit and consciousness of the living creatures reside within the wheels themselves. They share a single, unified purpose, a singular consciousness, a perfectly coordinated movement directed solely by the divine will. High above the heads of the 4 creatures, a structure resembling an immense expanse of polished ice or crystal spreads outward, terrible in its chilling beauty, stretched above them like a monumental platform or a foundational base. The sound emanating from their massive wings beneath this crystal firmament is deafening. A sound like the roar of surging waters, like the commanding voice of the Almighty, like the overwhelming clamor of a colossal army mobilized for war. When they cease their movement, the wings lower, and the immense sound tapers off to a near-silent whisper. It is then that Ezekiel perceives the voice. Above the crystalline expanse, there is the likeness of a throne. It glows with the intense, deep hue of pure sapphire, blue as the deepest, pre-creation sky. Seated upon this sapphire throne is a figure possessing the mere appearance of a human form. From the waist upward, Ezekiel witnesses something like molten, gleaming amber, enclosed entirely by a raging fire. From the waist downward, it is pure, consuming fire. A brilliant, overarching light envelopes the figure, reminiscent of the prismatic glory of a rainbow suspended in the clouds on a day of heavy rain. This, then, is the physical manifestation of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. Ezekiel, completely undone, immediately collapses onto his face. The totality of the vision overwhelms every one of his senses, exceeding his every capacity to process the enormity of what has just descended before him. The raging storm from the distant north has delivered the very throne of heaven to the banks of the Babylonian rivers. The astounding machinery of divine presence has descended specifically to encounter one man in exile, a solitary priest without a temple, a prophet destined to carry this staggering vision forward through millennia. Throughout the entire event, the wheels remain the unwavering constant. They constitute the foundation, the propulsion system, the literal vehicle by which the ultimate divine glory navigates the physical realm of creation. Unlike the cherubim, whose faces, wings, and hands suggest some conceptual relationship to created, organic beings, the wheels exist as pure function and abstract design. They represent something fundamentally other, a component that bridges the immense chasm between the physical plane and the transcendent reality. While ancient Mesopotamian writings frequently detail divine chariots, vehicles drawn by fearsome, hybrid beasts used by the gods of Babylon and Assyria, Ezekiel's vision annihilates all such earthly comparisons. The Merkaba, as later mystical tradition would name this throne chariot, operates entirely according to physics and principles far beyond any conceivable human engineering. The wheels require no axles, no bearings, no interlocking mechanical connections. The Spirit alone propels them. Will alone directs their complex movement. Furthermore, the countless eyes embedded in the structure imply a function far more profound and disturbing than mere celestial transport. They transform the chariot into an absolute instrument of divine knowing. Wherever this throne moves, perfect, inescapable awareness instantly follows. Nothing can hide from that penetrating gaze. The wheels bring the all-seeing, omnipresent nature of the divine into every corner of creation, making the transcendent terrifyingly immediate and present. Ezekiel is granted this terrible sight again. In his 10th chapter, the glory of the Lord ascends from the cherubim within the temple, preparing for its tragic departure from Jerusalem. The wheels reappear with precision, and Ezekiel is finally able to identify the living creatures, recognizing them as the same fierce guardians stationed at the entrance of Eden, the very beings whose images adorned the Ark of the Covenant. Yet, the wheels themselves remain unnamed, an entity identified only by their geometric function and their horrific eye-covered rims. Eventually, the prophet manages to rise. The voice commissions him to deliver an unyielding message to a rebellious house, a people destined to resist and reject his every word. But the vision itself is branded onto his soul. The wheels, the eyes, the creatures, the throne. They coalesce into a single, unified, terrifying image that will reverberate through centuries of intense mystical contemplation and foundational theological reflection. By the waters of Babylon, the transcendent machinery of divine presence descends to earth, making contact. And at the absolute center of this monumental vision, those strange wheels perpetually turn, those countless eyes perpetually watch, and the Spirit moves wherever it wills. The vision marks the initiation of Ezekiel's prophetic vocation. More significantly, it introduces the most profoundly alien, most frightening, and most logically incomprehensible component of biblical angelology into human consciousness. The Ophanim have arrived in our awareness. They will forever remain there. Deconstructing the wheels, anatomy of the Ophanim. The foundational Hebrew term appears deceptively straightforward. Oph, wheel. Plural Ophanim, wheels. Yet, the precise descriptions laid out in Ezekiel chapter 1 construct a reality far more bizarre and transcendent than mere transportation devices beneath a heavenly chariot. The description unfolds in specific layers, each detail adding geometric and theological complexity to an already stunning image. We begin with the basic configuration. For wheels, positioned immediately beside each living creature, resting on the earth. The text specifies their gleam is like the appearance of Tarshish stone or chrysolite. Scholars identify this as a brilliant, yellow-green beryl, possibly topaz or another golden-tinged gemstone. The color choice is significant, suggesting a substance caught between the earthly and the celestial, neither fully mineral nor fully ethereal. The wheels capture light like super-precious stones, refracting and reflecting its energy in blinding ways that make direct observation painful. Then, the first impossibility is encountered. The text states their structure and appearance were like a wheel within a wheel. The original Hebrew phrase, Ophan bitok Ophan, instantly challenges any conventional understanding of mechanics. How can one solid wheel occupy the interior space of another? Many scholarly translations opt for a wheel intersecting a wheel, or a wheel at right angles to another wheel. A picture slowly crystallizes. Two massive wheels inhabiting the exact same central point, positioned perpendicularly to each other, forming a gyroscope or sphere that enables movement in any conceivable direction without the need for the entire structure to physically pivot or turn. Imagine a wheel rolling north to south, instantly combined with a second wheel occupying the same center rolling east to west. Together, They form a unified structure that simply proceeds straight ahead in whichever direction the spirit desires. This conceptual design defies every known principle of ancient vehicle construction. Chariots require turning radii. Wheels necessitate axles and fixed bearings. Movement depends on mechanical advantage. The Ophanim categorically ignore these requirements. The spirit is their sole engine. Ezekiel emphasizes this crucial theological distinction. Wherever the spirit wanted to go, they went, and the wheels rose along with them. For the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. The wheels possess no independent agency. They move only in response to the cherubim's motion, rising when the creatures rise, halting when the creatures halt. Yet, the phrasing suggests an intimacy greater than mere parallel motion. The wheels and the creatures share a unified consciousness, a singular directing will that governs both elements. However, it is the horrifying spectacle of the rims, *gav* in Hebrew, meaning back or curve, that demands our deepest attention. The text explicitly declares, "Their rims were high and awesome, and all four rims were full of eyes all around." The rims define the outer circumference where a normal wheel would contact the ground. Yet these rims ascend to an intimidating height, and covering every millimeter of that curved surface, countless eyes perpetually stare outward. The text offers no count, but the phrase male inim suggests total saturation. Considering four wheels, each composed of two intersecting rings, the number of eyes spirals into the hundreds, likely thousands. Each eye is wide open, watching, cataloging, seeing without pause or rest. While ancient Near Eastern protective spirits sometimes feature multiple eyes to symbolize vigilance, those figures rarely exceed 6 eyes. The Ophanim move beyond this cultural convention entirely, shifting from symbolic multiplicity to literal total coverage. The Ophanim move beyond symbolic vigilance. They embody absolute, total, inescapable observation. The eyes also carry profound theological weight. In Hebrew ontology, the eye is inextricably linked to knowledge, ***, and presence. To be visually apprehended by the divine is to be completely known. To be observed means to exist under the conscious, acute awareness of the watcher. The myriad eyes upon the Ophanim transform every location they occupy into a zone of perfect divine knowledge. Nothing can remain obscured. The wheels, therefore, enforce total transparency wherever they manifest. The mechanical paradox deepens when one considers movement. While conventional wheels require rotational spinning, the Ophanim achieve movement directionally through their intersecting design. Yet, the eyes remain visually constant, oriented outward regardless of the structure's trajectory. This results in a deeply unsettling, terrifying effect. The eyes see continuously, in every direction simultaneously, never losing sight, never turning away. Furthermore, the immense height of the rims magnifies the terror. When Ezekiel defines them as high and awesome, the Hebrew word yair simultaneously conveys both profound fear and reverent awe. The wheels completely dominate the visual space, rising above the human observer and placing the eye-covered rims at a level that looks down upon everything earthly. The seamless connection between the wheels and creatures is continuously emphasized. When the creatures move, the wheels move. When the creatures rise from the earth, the wheels rise with them. The text reiterates this parallelism to stress that these two elements function as a single, unified mechanism. The living creatures may possess organic-seeming elements, faces, wings, hands, but the wheels match them precisely in synchronized motion and unified purpose. Additional clarifying details emerge in Ezekiel's subsequent vision in chapter 10. There, the prophet witnesses the same wheels positioned within the temple courts and receives further insight. He hears the structures referred to as the whirling wheels, or galgal in Hebrew, suggesting rapid rotation or circular velocity. The cherubim place their hands into the fire burning between them and take coals to scatter over Jerusalem, with the wheels maintaining their position beside each creature throughout. Crucially, in chapter 10, the eye coverage is dramatically expanded. It is stated that not only the rims contain eyes, but their whole body, their backs, their hands, their wings, and the wheels themselves were full of eyes all around. This extends the original description, implying that the observation network covers the entire, integrated cherubim Ophanim mechanism, creating a complete landscape of ceaseless watching, of being seen from every conceivable angle by countless perceptive organs. The text provides no explanation for why this design exists. Ezekiel offers only a detailed, precise report of the reality he witnesses. Later mystical tradition attempts to interpret the meaning, but the prophet himself supplies only the facts. The wheels move by spirit. They are saturated with eyes. They rise and fall with the living creatures. They form the base of the divine throne chariot. The geometry alone is unsettling to the modern mind. Computer graphics artists who have attempted to render the Ophanim produce unsettling animations that show intersecting spheres covered in eyes. The results disturb even those familiar with the biblical text. The wheels seem to occupy impossible spaces, moving in ways that defy visual comprehension, their surfaces crawling with unblinking, observing eyes. Yet, the ancient audience would have found them equally disturbing for entirely different reasons. To them, the Ophanim represented a radical departure from all known divine iconography. Egyptian sunbarks, Babylonian god chariots, Canaanite cloud riders, none featured anything remotely like the eye-covered wheels. The vision stood alone, unique, rejecting conventional categories and easy comparisons. The wheels refuse easy symbolism. They do not merely represent anything. They simply are what the text describes. Structures of intersecting rings covered in eyes, propelled by the Spirit, forming the foundation of God's mobile throne. Their function dictates their form completely, leaving no room for metaphorical softening of their strange, terrible reality. Function over form, the Ophanim as the divine mobile throne. The throne itself is the focal point of the entire vision. Every other component serves this central reality. The cherubim stand sentinel beneath it. The crystal expanse forms the foundation for the seated figure. The wheels connect to the earth, providing the instantaneous mechanism by which the throne, the creatures, and the divine glory function as a single mobile vehicle. To truly understand the Ophanim is to comprehend their ultimate purpose. They render divine presence mobile. Classical Hebrew scripture introduces a complex theological dilemma. If the Almighty is truly omnipresent, existing everywhere at once, how can any specific location genuinely contain or localize his presence? Yet, the texts repeatedly cite God dwelling in defined locations: the tabernacle, the Jerusalem temple, Mount Sinai, the guiding cloud in the desert. These accounts suggest both divine omnipresence and localized manifestation simultaneously. The Merkabah resolves this precise tension. The throne chariot permits the glory to manifest in specific, localized places while retaining the infinite freedom to transport itself anywhere instantaneously. The wheels are the technical enablers of this system. Ancient Near Eastern kings rode chariots. These vehicles symbolized power, mobility, and military might. A king on a chariot could move swiftly across his territory, appearing unexpectedly to enforce his will or crush his enemies. The chariot extended the king's reach beyond the palace. The divine chariot multiplies this concept infinitely. Where an earthly king might visit his provinces, divine presence can manifest anywhere in creation. Where a war chariot instills fear in human armies, the Merkabah brings absolute awareness and inescapable judgment. The wheels ensure that no place remains too remote, no corner too hidden, and no refuge too distant from the gaze of divine holiness. The Ophanim execute this function through their geometrically impossible design. The intersecting structure facilitates immediate, uninhibited directional shifts. The Spirit transports them without delay or limitation. Physical topography is utterly irrelevant. The wheels ascend from the earth as effortlessly as they traverse it. Water, mountain ranges, valleys, cities. Every area is equally and instantaneously accessible to the throne they bear. However, this mobility is secondary to the deeper purpose. The wheels facilitate presence, and presence entails absolute knowledge. The eyes covering the rims are fully activated the moment the throne appears. Wherever the Merkabah manifests, total observation instantly begins. The location becomes utterly transparent to divine sight. Everything within range of those countless eyes falls under complete scrutiny. Consider the immediate context of Ezekiel. The Israelites exiled in Babylon might have rationalized that they were beyond the scope of divine observation. The temple was either ruined or inaccessible. The promised land was far across foreign, hostile territory. Perhaps they believed divine attention was tethered only to Jerusalem. The vision violently shatters this dangerous illusion. The throne manifests directly in Babylon. The eye-covered wheels touch foreign soil. The observant eyes scrutinize the exiled priests seated beside a Mesopotamian canal. Divine presence moves where it chooses, restrained by nothing, limited by no physical boundary, contained by no single geography. The Ophanim make this terrifying freedom palpable and immediate. The explicit connection between the wheels and the throne is reinforced throughout Ezekiel's subsequent visions. In chapter 10, as the glory prepares its terrible departure from the temple, the cherubim position themselves at the entrance of the east gate, the wheels standing rigidly beside them. When the glory lifts from above the cherubim, the wheels ascend simultaneously. The entire, unified structure mobilizes as one unit: throne, glory, creatures, wheels. Later, as the glory pauses at the east gate, witnessing the abomination of 25 men worshipping the sun with their backs to the holy place, the departure becomes necessary. The wheels facilitate this holy withdrawal, serving as the vehicle that carries the divine presence out of the polluted sanctuary, over the Mount of Olives, and away from Jerusalem entirely. This intrinsic mobility holds a profound and implicit threat. What descends in glory can also emphatically depart. The arrival of the throne brings either profound blessing or swift judgment, entirely dependent on what the eyes observe. The presence that chooses to dwell can just as easily abandon. The glory that fills a space can withdraw completely. The Ophanim enable this entire theological dynamic, transforming divine presence from a static, fixed reality into a dynamic, responsive force reacting to human actions. This crucial function was well understood by Jewish commentators throughout history. The Merkabah became the central axis of mystical Jewish contemplation, representing the terrifying, dynamic interface where the transcendent heaven and the immanent earth intersect. The gap between the divine and the mortal world momentarily collapses when the Ophanim begin to roll. Medieval interpreters sometimes compared the wheels, known as the Ophanim, to a royal palanquin, a luxurious, curtained litter reserved for high nobility, or perhaps an entire mobile throne room. This interpretation drew parallels with powerful rulers in the ancient Near East who frequently governed from their war chariots or traveling litters, conducting vital state business while on the move. These itinerant monarchs would receive petitions, issue sweeping commands, and render binding judgments as they traversed their domains, asserting their omnipresent authority across the territory. The divine chariot, the Merkabah, operates on a fundamentally similar, yet infinitely vaster scale. This celestial throne moves through the entirety of creation, effectively rendering every single location potentially a place of divine encounter, and every passing moment possibly a time of profound divine manifestation. The wheels do not merely function as transport mechanisms. They actively transform the very spaces they enter. When the Ophanim appear in a location, that space becomes immediately and irrevocably charged with the numinous divine presence. The otherwise ordinary street corner, riverbank, or wilderness spot suddenly transitions into a sacred meeting place, and the mundane activities of the everyday become a site of astonishing revelation. This radical transformation occurs not because the physical location changes its geological or geographical characteristics, but solely because the throne brings a new, higher reality with it, superimposed upon the existing cosmos. The eyes of the observer begin to perceive what was, in fact, always present, but which is now viewed under the searing lens of divine scrutiny. The prophet's spirit is granted an awareness that makes the previously hidden dimensions of reality instantly visible. Ezekiel's prophetic commission occurs specifically in the immediate presence of this mobile throne. The authoritative voice speaks not from a distant, inaccessible empyrean, but from above the crystalline expanse while the massive wheels come to rest on the earth, specifically beside the Chebar River. The prophet receives his life-altering instructions while entirely surrounded by the complex, awe-inspiring machinery of the divine presence itself. This distinct setting matters immensely because it definitively demonstrates that prophetic authority derives its legitimacy and power directly from an immediate, dynamic encounter with the mobile throne. The message is transmitted not from some remote, static heaven, but from a present and active reality that has consciously descended to meet the messenger in the realm of history and materiality. The devastating departure vision recorded in chapter 10 mirrors this function of the Merkabah in precise reverse motion. As the radiant glory of God prepares to abandon the Jerusalem temple, a truly cataclysmic theological event, Ezekiel watches the sorrowful process unfold in distinct, slow-moving stages. The glory initially rises majestically from its traditional resting place above the cherubim. It then moves with deliberate slowness to the very threshold of the temple structure. It pauses significantly at the east gate, the traditional point of entrance. Finally, the presence relocates entirely, moving to the mountain located east of the city, the Mount of Olives. Each stage of this withdrawal involves the active participation of the wheels. Each deliberate movement demonstrates their essential function: to carry the divine presence wherever it chooses, either to establish its rest or, tragically, to effect its abandonment. Scholars frequently note that this inherent mobility critically distinguishes the biblical vision from the surrounding theological landscapes of the ancient Near East. Other regional deities might conceivably travel between their established sanctuaries, yet their actual, tangible presence invariably remained tethered and functionally tied to physical cult images, massive temple structures, or specific localized sacred topography. The biblical text, however, presents a radical departure. A presence that requires no physical anchor, no meticulously carved statue, and no fixed, permanent geographical location. The Ophanim perfectly embody this absolute freedom, making the divine throne fundamentally independent of all human construction, maintenance, or control. The Ophanim serve the throne with absolute fidelity, but they also serve to protect it. Their massive rims, covered entirely in countless eyes, create an impenetrable perimeter of total and instant awareness around the divine seat. Nothing can approach the throne unobserved, and no potential threat can possibly go unnoticed or uncalculated. The wheels form a sophisticated defensive barrier, secured not through mere physical might or brute force, but through perfect, instantaneous knowledge. They render surprise impossible, concealment utterly futile, and any approach transparently revealed. This critical protective function operates dynamically in multiple directions. The wheels safeguard the throne from any form of profane intrusion or ritual defilement, yet they simultaneously expose profane spaces to the most intense divine scrutiny. The eyes see outward from the throne, making every inch of the surrounding Merkabah environment visible to the one seated above. This reciprocal protection runs both ways. It guards the holy from pollution while simultaneously revealing that existing pollution to the swift and inevitable holy judgment. The genius of the Merkabah's design lies in its inherent completeness and flawless integration. The intersecting wheels permit movement in literally any direction: up, down, forward, or sideways without the need to turn. The animating spirit provides motivation without any mechanical limitations or friction. The dense covering of eyes ensures total, perfect awareness in all directions simultaneously. The extreme height of the rims extends this awareness far upward, preventing any perceptual blindness above or below the plane of the wheels. Taken together, these features forge the perfect vehicle for omnipresent manifestation, capable of appearing anywhere, instantly aware of everything, and carrying the fullness of divine glory wherever it is dispatched. The eyes of God are the preeminent symbols of omniscience and judgment. These eyes fundamentally refuse to blink. They stare without pause, without rest, and, in the context of judgment, without mercy. Every single inch of the Ophanim's curved surface crawls with these organs of sight, creating an image that profoundly disturbs even those who claim to understand the abstract concept of divine holiness. But the eyes represent far more than just mere observation. They embody a theological reality that ancient peoples grasped with visceral, immediate clarity. Nothing, absolutely nothing, escapes divine knowledge. In Hebrew thought, the concept of sight, *araya**, and the concept of knowledge, *yada**, are inseparably connected. The verb to see frequently functions as a synonym for to know or to understand. When God sees, this divine seeing penetrates far beyond superficial surface appearance, reaching into the deepest, hidden truth. The eyes covering the Ophanim take this connection to its most terrifying and ultimate expression. They do not simply look at things. They know things. They comprehend what they observe with perfect understanding, missing no minute detail, overlooking no subtle significance. The sheer number of eyes matters profoundly to this theology. A single eye might merely symbolize basic awareness. Multiple eyes would suggest enhanced vigilance. But countless eyes covering every conceivable surface creates something entirely different. Total, inescapable, absolute knowledge. There exists no angle from which a person might hide, no shadow deep enough to provide concealment, and no physical distance great enough to escape that relentless, all-consuming gaze. The multiplication of eyes transforms mere visual quantity into an entirely new, elevated quality, turning enhanced vision into true, absolute omniscience. Biblical texts frequently and explicitly connect divine sight with the enactment of judgment. Proverbs states plainly that the eyes of the Lord are in every place, constantly watching both the evil and the good. The psalmist declares that God's eyes observe all the children of humanity, meticulously examining the actions of everyone. Chronicles records that the eyes of the Lord range throughout the earth, actively seeking to strengthen those whose hearts are fully and totally committed to Him. These passages establish a clear, unwavering pattern. Divine seeing invariably leads to divine evaluation. What God observes, God judges. The Ophanim render this pattern mechanical, immediate, and utterly inescapable. The wheels literally carry judgment wherever they roll. The eyes covering their rims activate as intrinsic instruments of evaluation, relentlessly sorting the holy from the profane, the righteous from the wicked, the true from the false. The throne situated above issues the verdict, but the wheels below provide the comprehensive means by which all necessary evidence reaches the judge. Nothing observed by those countless eyes fails to inform the ultimate verdict. Consider the immediate context of Ezekiel's vision. Jerusalem stands utterly polluted by entrenched idolatry and widespread injustice. The temple itself hosts abominable practices. Corrupt leaders oppress the poor and vulnerable. False prophets speak self-serving lies. Priests profane holy things for personal gain. Crucially, many of these crimes are committed in deep secrecy, in inner rooms behind locked doors. The perpetrators operate under the arrogant belief that they are hidden, their actions concealed from observation and safe from consequence. Then the wheels appear. The eyes see everything. The inner rooms become instantly transparent. The closed doors fly open under the force of divine sight. The secret gatherings, the hidden shrines, the nocturnal ceremonies, all become blindingly visible. The Ophanim bring an inescapable, devastating awareness into spaces that were dependent upon darkness and concealment for their operation. The judgment that inevitably follows stems directly from this perfect revelation. The eyes make the unassailable case. The throne renders the final, irreversible verdict. Ancient peoples understood shame in a profoundly different way than modern cultures. To be seen meant to be known. To be known meant to be evaluated. To be evaluated meant to inescapably face judgment. The eyes on the Ophanim compress this entire progression into a single, terrifying reality. They see, know, evaluate, and report simultaneously. The observation is the judgment. The immense height of the wheels further intensifies this effect. Most human observers would stand at ground level, compelled to look upward at the eye-covered rims. This perspective drastically reverses the normal relationship between the watcher and the watched. The eyes look down from above, observing from a position of inherent superiority and overwhelming advantage. This elevated viewing position powerfully emphasizes the vast power differential between comprehensive divine knowledge and pathetic human attempts at concealment. What humans desperately think they are hiding, the elevated eyes reveal completely and instantly. The perpetual motion of the wheels adds yet another dimension of theological terror. Stationary eyes might observe one location continuously, but the Ophanim move, carrying their observing capacity throughout the entirety of creation. They transform divine omniscience from a mere abstract theological claim into a mobile, active, and immediate reality. The eyes can appear anywhere, observe anything at any moment. No location guarantees safety or privacy from their ceaseless scrutiny. Biblical law understood that justice necessitates witnesses. Courts required testimony. Conviction demanded credible evidence. But human witnesses might lie, forget details, or simply fail to see crucial facts. The eyes on the Ophanim solve this fundamental problem completely. They provide perfect testimony, absolute evidence, and flawless recollection. Nothing they observe can ever be disputed or challenged in any court. Their flawless witness establishes truth beyond all question or appeal, serving as the cosmic record keepers. The Book of Revelation explicitly draws on this powerful imagery when describing the throne room of heaven. The 4 living creatures surrounding God's throne are described as full of eyes in front and behind. The text expands this detailed description. And the 4 living creatures, each of them with 6 wings, are full of eyes all around and within. This New Testament vision powerfully echoes Ezekiel's, confirming that the eye-covered beings remain absolutely central to celestial imagery and the mechanics of divine judgment. Later Jewish mysticism significantly elaborated upon the function of the eyes. The Hekkelot texts, which detail heavenly palaces, describe them as guarded by fearsome angels whose sole purpose is to observe and evaluate those mystics seeking to ascend. These guardians possess the power to permit or deny entry based exclusively on what their eyes see. The Ophanim function similarly, but on a vast, cosmic scale, observing all of creation to determine worthiness, holiness, and righteousness. Medieval Christian interpretation sometimes connected the Ophanim's eyes to the concept of divine providence. In this more benevolent reading, God's eyes watch over creation not merely to judge, but to actively guide, protect, and sustain life. The countless eyes see needs long before they are verbally expressed, detect dangers before they arrive, and perceive opportunities before they pass. This softer reading somewhat mitigates the raw terror, but it rigorously maintains the central truth. Nothing escapes divine awareness. However, judgment remains the primary association. The eyes on the wheels appear in contexts of profound divine evaluation. They observe Jerusalem's sins just before the glory departs. They watch the abominations in the temple just before the judgment falls. Their very presence signals that the time for hidden wickedness has irrevocably ended. What they see will be addressed. What they record will be answered. The emotional and psychological impact of countless watching eyes cannot be overstated. Modern horror frequently employs eyes as a symbol of paranoia and inescapable surveillance. Being watched creates gnawing anxiety. Being entirely unable to escape observation generates paralyzing fear. The Ophanim took this deep psychological reality and made it absolutely theological. Under their omnipresent gaze, every single human being stands completely exposed, totally known, and utterly transparent. This exposure serves multiple crucial purposes. For the wicked, it brings sheer terror. Their hidden deeds become public knowledge in the divine court. Their secret sins, the concealed violence, the private corruption, the masked cruelty, all become visible, damning evidence against them. For the righteous, the eyes offer a profound comfort. Their hidden faithfulness receives full recognition. Their secret, unuttered prayers are observed and acknowledged. Their unnoticed kindness is meticulously recorded. The same eyes that terrify the wicked actively validate the faithful, confirming that their unseen righteousness has not, in fact, escaped divine attention. But even this comfort carries immense weight. To be known so completely means to have no private self, no unobserved thought, no truly secret motive. The eyes see not only actions but underlying intentions, not only completed deeds but raw desires. Perfect knowledge extends into the inner life, the hidden heart, the unspoken wish. Nothing remains truly private when the Ophanim turn their collective gaze upon creation. The theological implications stretch far beyond mere individual judgment. The eyes observe entire nations, watching how societies treat their most vulnerable members. They scrutinize economic systems, evaluating whether justice flows through financial transactions. They examine religious institutions, determining whether worship remains pure or has corrupted into empty, self-serving ritual. The scope of their observation exactly matches the scope of divine concern. Everything matters. Everything counts. Everything receives scrutiny. Ezekiel's vision bursts forth during a moment of national catastrophe. Babylon has conquered Judah. The devastating exile has already begun. The bewildered people question whether God sees their suffering, whether divine justice remains operative, and whether the cosmic order has utterly collapsed. The shocking appearance of the Merkaba with its eye-covered wheels answers these desperate questions definitively. Divine sight continues. Divine knowledge remains perfect. Divine judgment proceeds precisely according to what those countless eyes meticulously observe. The eyes establish absolute accountability. They make moral cause and effect inescapable. What is done will be seen. What is seen will be known. What is known will be judged. This unbreakable chain of consequences flows directly from the very existence of those watching eyes, from their perfect vision, and from their comprehensive coverage of every surface of the wheels. The Ophanim's eyes transform the universe into a profoundly moral space where actions have weight and consequences have absolute certainty. The eyes watch. The throne judges. Justice becomes not a faint hope, but an inevitability guaranteed by the perfect observation of beings whose core purpose is to see, know, and report everything that occurs within creation. Beyond Ezekiel, the Ophanim in Second Temple Judaism, and Enoch. The vision beside the Kibber did not end with the prophet Ezekiel. The prophet's intense testimony quickly entered the consciousness of later Jewish thinkers, mystics, and apocalyptic writers who significantly expanded and elaborated upon the Merkaba imagery. During the Second Temple period, roughly 516 B.C.E. to 70 C.E., Jewish literature began the detailed classification and organization of celestial beings into complex, formalized hierarchies. The Ophanim found their specific place within these systems, gaining entirely new characteristics and roles that extended far beyond their basic biblical description as wheels. The Book of Enoch provides the most extensive early development of angelology outside the canonical Hebrew scriptures. This collection of texts, particularly 1 Enoch, dates from the 3rd century B.C.E. to the 1st century C.E. The book enjoyed extremely wide circulation among Jewish communities and early Christians, profoundly shaping their understanding of heavenly realities and cosmic order. 1st Enoch describes Enoch's profound journey through the heavens, guided by angels who reveal the hidden secrets of creation, impending judgment, and the divine throne room. During these transformative visions, Enoch encounters various orders of angels, each assigned specific functions and fixed positions in the celestial bureaucracy. The Ophanim appear prominently among these beings, no longer merely the mechanical wheels of God's chariot, but recognized as a distinct, high-ranking class of angels with their own intrinsic nature and active purpose. Later traditions, building extensively on Enoshic literature, describe them as beings who never sleep, standing in perpetual, vigilant guard around the throne of God's glory. Their role had expanded dramatically from simple transportation to one of active protection, scrutiny, and specialized service. They function now as true guardians, maintaining their ceaseless, vigilant watch through the countless eyes that completely cover their forms. This development marks a significant theological shift. The Ophanim transition from being mechanical components of the divine chariot to conscious, high-ranking beings possessing agency and specialized purpose. Other Second Temple texts built upon this foundational concept. The Book of Jubilees, composed in the 2nd century B.C.E., presents a retelling of Genesis and Exodus with elaborate angelological details. While it does not focus extensively on the Ophanim specifically, it establishes the necessary framework of angelic ranks and orders that makes their subsequent classification possible. Angels of presence, angels of sanctification, angels of various natural phenomena, all receive definition and position within the overarching cosmic structure. The Testament of Levi, part of the Testaments of the 12 Patriarchs from the 2nd century B.C.E., describes 7 distinct heavens, each populated by different orders of angels performing specific duties. This vertical organization of the cosmos provided a necessary spatial context for understanding where different angelic beings dwell and operate. The Ophanim, functioning as supreme throne guardians, occupy the highest levels, closest to the unbearable divine glory. These developments reflect the broader theological concerns of the period. As Jewish thought engaged with Greek philosophy and Persian dualism, questions concerning mediation between an utterly transcendent God and his creation became increasingly pressing. If God exists as utterly transcendent, how does divine will effectively affect the physical world? Angels provided a crucial answer, serving as intermediaries who bridge the immense gap between eternal spirit and temporal matter. The Ophanim fit naturally into this framework. Their hybrid nature, part terrifying mechanical wheel, part conscious spiritual being, makes them ideal mediators. They physically touch the earth through their movement, yet remain intimately connected to the heavenly throne. They see creation through their countless eyes but serve purely divine purposes. They exist at the critical intersection of transcendence and immanence, making the connection between heaven and earth both visible and functional. Later mystical texts pushed these ideas even further. The Hekkalot literature, which emerged between the 3rd and 7th centuries C.E., describes detailed practices for ascending through the heavenly palaces to stand before God's throne. These texts treat the Merkaba vision not as a singular, unique prophetic experience but as a precise template that trained mystics might replicate through proper preparation and esoteric technique. In this literature, the Ophanim take on a far more terrifying aspect. They become insurmountable obstacles that must be skillfully passed, fierce guardians who challenge the worthiness of those seeking to ascend. Their eyes evaluate the spiritual condition of anyone attempting to approach the divine throne. They possess the power to violently turn back the unworthy, striking them down with fire or psychological confusion. They serve as the final, most fearsome test before one reaches the inner sanctum of heaven itself. 3 Enoch, one of the later Hekkalot texts, provides extensive detail about the angelic hierarchy. It names multiple classes of angels: seraphim, cherubim, and Ophanim, among others. Each class possesses specific characteristics, duties, and precise positions relative to the throne. The Ophanim appear as the living wheels of the Merkaba, beings of immense, palpable power who serve directly in the divine presence. According to the mystical texts that developed from this tradition, they shine like brilliant torches. They burn like intensely fiery coals. They speak in voices that resemble the sound of thunder. The eyes covering them see in all directions simultaneously, missing absolutely nothing. When they move, the heavens shake violently. When they speak, the earth trembles beneath their sound. Their presence alone inspires profound terror in lesser angels who serve at greater distances from the throne. This literature also formally introduces the concept of angelic songs and hymns. The Ophanim, along with other high-ranking celestial beings, continuously praise the divine glory. Their powerful voices combine with the seraphim and cherubim in an endless, cosmic liturgy that actively maintains cosmic order. These songs are not optional or occasional performances. They form part of the fundamental mechanism by which reality sustains itself. Should the praise cease, reality itself, it is implied, might immediately collapse. The hierarchical position of the Ophanim matters tremendously in this mystical literature. They rank among the absolute highest orders, closer to the divine throne than most other angels. Only the seraphim and cherubim share this intimate proximity. This placement reflects their critical function. They are the beings who serve at the very center of divine activity, witnessing and actively participating in the governance of all creation. The Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered in caves near Qumran between 1947 and 1956, preserve texts from a Jewish sect active during the Second Temple period. Among these scrolls, the Songs of the Sabbath Sacrifice describes heavenly worship in elaborate detail. The text presents 13 songs, one for each Sabbath of the first quarter of the year, describing the celestial liturgy and the angelic priests who conduct it. These songs specifically mention the Ophanim as active participants in heavenly worship. They stand in the divine sanctuary, joining the other angelic orders in constant praise. The texts describe their profound radiance, their deliberate movement, and their thundering voices. The earthly Sabbath worship practiced at Qumran was understood by the community as actively participating in this heavenly liturgy, creating a vital connection between the community's prayers and the cosmic praise offered by the Ophanim and their companions. This connection between earthly and heavenly worship became central to subsequent Jewish mystical practice. The Ophanim were not viewed as distant, abstract beings. They represented a fundamental reality that humans could approach through proper devotion and technique. The gap between human and angelic existence might be temporarily traversed, at least momentarily, through mystical ascent or through the devoted participation in liturgy that mirrored heavenly patterns. Rabbinic literature from the same general period shows significantly more caution about these powerful speculations. The Mishnah and Talmud, compiled between the 2nd and 6th centuries C.E., contain discussions about the Merkabah vision but issue severe warnings against excessive speculation. The opening chapter of Ezekiel was formally recognized as dangerous material, strictly not to be studied by anyone considered immature or unprepared. One might teach it privately to an individual if that person was demonstrably wise and understanding, but public exposition was explicitly forbidden. Stories circulated widely about rabbis who delved too deeply into Merkabah speculation and suffered terrible consequences. For entered the pards, the orchard or paradise of mystical contemplation. One died, one went mad, one became a heretic. Only Rabbi Akiva entered and departed in peace. These stern warnings reflect a genuine concern that deep meditation on beings like the Ophanim could overwhelm human consciousness, potentially leading to severe psychological or spiritual damage. Yet the fascination with these beings persisted. The Ophanim represented something truly unique within the celestial hierarchy. Other angels might appear somewhat more approachable, more comprehensible. The seraphim at least have a somewhat relatable, if highly stylized, form. The cherubim, while strange, still possess faces and wings that suggest recognizable created beings. But the Ophanim remained fundamentally alien. Wheels covered entirely in eyes, moved only by spirit, existing at the blurring boundary between sophisticated mechanism and pure consciousness. This radical alienness made them powerful symbols for mystical transformation. To truly encounter the Ophanim meant to face the Gans Andir, the utterly other, to confront divine reality without the softening mediation of familiar forms. They challenged every human category, every attempt to domesticate the divine into manageable, understandable concepts. The eyes forced the mystic to recognize what it meant to be seen, to be known, to stand utterly transparent before absolute awareness. The liturgical dimension of their existence expanded their significance beyond individual mystical experience. Jewish worship incorporated references to angelic praise, particularly in the Kedusha, the sanctification prayer that quotes the seraphim's cry from Isaiah. While the Ophanim do not feature as prominently in this specific prayer, the broader tradition of joining earthly to heavenly worship created space for contemplating their crucial role in cosmic order. Philo of Alexandria, a Jewish philosopher writing in the 1st century C.E., attempted to synthesize biblical tradition with Greek philosophical concepts. His works discuss angels primarily as divine powers or aspects of the Logos. He pays less attention to specific angelic orders like the Ophanim, the wheels, and focusing instead on the broader philosophical requirement for intermediary beings positioned between the absolute, transcendent God and the material cosmos. Yet, even within the highly abstract framework developed by thinkers like Philo of Alexandria, the inescapable need for entities that bridge the infinite gap between divine transcendence and earthly immanence remained a foundational theological principle. Early Christian texts reveal a clear familiarity with these rich Jewish traditions concerning celestial beings and angelic hierarchies. The developing corpus of the New Testament frequently alludes to specific ranks, mentioning entities such as thrones, powers, principalities, and other established celestial orders. Paul's letter to the Colossians, for instance, speaks authoritatively of things visible and invisible, encompassing whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. These references strongly imply a pre-existing, shared theological vocabulary regarding heavenly administration between the Hellenistic Jewish community and the nascent Christian communities. The term thrones, *thronoi*, as utilized in these early Christian epistles is highly suggestive, potentially connecting back to the Jewish concept of the Ophanim, as later systematic tradition explicitly identified the wheels with the order of thrones. However, during this formative early period, that connection remained implicit, not yet formalized into a systematic classification. Early Christian writers generally prioritized demonstrating the absolute supremacy of Christ over all angelic powers and dominions, rather than engaging in the complex, detailed classification of those powers themselves. The destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE marked a devastating and definitive turning point for Jewish religious thought, particularly fueling the flames of mysticism. Deprived of the physical location for sacrifice and devotion, speculation about the heavenly worship and the celestial sanctuary gained tremendous and urgent significance. If the earthly temple lay in ruins, perhaps the Heikel, the heavenly temple, could provide a new, enduring focus for devotion, hope, and cosmic stability. The Ophanim, functioning as the guardians and dynamic components of the divine throne chariot, thus assumed crucial roles in these vital mental reconstructions of sacred, cosmological space. Furthermore, the intense apocalyptic crisis that followed the temple's destruction intensified profound interest in the nature of divine judgment. If God permitted such a cataclysmic catastrophe, what did this reveal about the nature of cosmic justice? The Ophanim, with their vast surfaces covered in countless, observing eyes, offered vital assurance. Divine knowledge remained perfect, immaculate, and exhaustive, despite the appearance of earthly chaos. Nothing escaped notice. Every act of violence, every moment of destruction had been recorded instantaneously. Justice, therefore, would eventually prevail precisely because the throne still stood immutable. The wheels still turned. The eyes still watched. This period witnessed increased and detailed speculation regarding the very structure of heaven itself. How many levels, or Heikalot, palaces, existed? Which angelic orders inhabited each sphere? What formidable barriers separated them? The Ophanim typically appeared in the descriptions of the highest heaven, the level closest to the unveiled divine glory, Shekinah *. They formed an integral, immediate part of the throne's sacred environment, sharing the inner sanctum of cosmic authority with the cherubim and seraphim. These momentous developments profoundly shaped how subsequent Jewish and Christian thinkers understood spiritual reality. The Ophanim ceased to be merely strange, unsettling images found in a single prophetic text. They became essential, moving components of a comprehensive cosmology. A spiritual map that meticulously organized celestial beings, explained divine interaction with creation, and provided detailed guides for mystical ascent toward a terrifying, direct divine encounter. Chariots of fire, the Merkabah mystics, and the practices of ascension. The visionary experience of the prophet Ezekiel would not remain a passive theological contemplation. What Ezekiel witnessed beside the Chebar River became, for later practitioners, an experience to be actively sought, achieved, and survived. Between the 3rd and 10th centuries CE, Jewish mystics developed complex, highly dangerous practices aimed at replicating the prophet's journey, ascending through the heavenly realms to ultimately stand before the Merkabah, chariot throne. These practitioners, known historically as the Yedei Merkava, riders or descenders of the chariot, generated detailed esoteric texts describing the necessary techniques, the manifold dangers, and the visionary encounters associated with this perilous pursuit. The Ophanim featured centrally in these accounts, dramatically transformed from static objects of prophecy into dynamic, terrifying obstacles on a treacherous spiritual journey. The Heikalot texts, the literature of the palaces, form the core library of this spiritual movement. Written primarily in Hebrew and Aramaic, these documents describe the 7 heavenly palaces, their fierce angelic guardians, the secret names and seals required for passage, and the terrible perils facing anyone audacious enough to attempt the ascent. They presented the Merkabah vision not as a singular, unique prophetic gift, but as an attainable, albeit horrific, goal for those prepared to undergo rigorous, exhaustive preparation and accept truly terrible risks. The foundational cosmology positioned 7 heavenly palaces, one towering above the next, leading to the ultimate highest heaven where the divine throne resided. Each palace was secured by gates vigorously guarded by immensely powerful, fire-wielding angels. These guardians challenged every ascending soul, demanding correct passwords, testing worthiness, and mercilessly turning back all those deemed unqualified to proceed. The Ophanim appeared at the highest levels, forming part of the throne's immediate retinue, effectively serving as the final, ultimate gatekeepers before the mystic reached the culmination of the journey. Preparation for this ascent demanded extensive intellectual and spiritual discipline. The aspirant meticulously memorized divine names, precise angelic titles, and sacred seals, ****. These complex verbal and conceptual tools provided the sole protection during the journey. Without them, the guardian angels were swift and brutal, capable of striking down the unprepared mystic, casting them back to earth or worse, subjecting them to spiritual annihilation. The texts warned repeatedly and explicitly about the involvement dangers, detailing stories of practitioners who attempted the ascent unprepared and suffered horrifying consequences. Madness, immediate burning by celestial fire, or complete spiritual dissolution. The ascent ritual began with intensive meditation, prolonged fasting, and prayer. The mystic would recite specific hymns and detailed invocations, sometimes while performing intense ascetic practices. The overriding goal was to achieve a state where consciousness could separate from the physical body and ascend through the heavenly realms. This out-of-body, ecstatic experience allowed the practitioner to approach realities normally hidden from mortal perception. As the mystic ascended through the palaces, each level presented new and escalating challenges. The guardian angels at every gate appeared monstrous and terrifying, wielding instruments of fire and judgment. They interrogated the ascending soul, demanding unimpeachable proof of worthiness to pass. The mystic responded by uttering the proper names and seals, demonstrating the hidden knowledge that granted passage. Failure at any stage proved catastrophic, leading to immediate expulsion or subjection to swift angelic punishment. The Ophanim appeared as the mystic approached the divine throne itself. These beings transcended the function of merely guarding a gate like the lower angels. They constituted the very structure of the throne, the wheels upon which divine glory dynamically rested and moved. To approach the Merkaba meant to approach them directly, to come within range of their countless, unwavering eyes, and to expose oneself utterly to their perfect, forensic observation. The Haikalot texts describe this encounter in visceral, overwhelming terms. The Ophanim shone with unbearable, consuming brightness. Their massive wheels turned with sounds like the roaring of rushing rivers or the dreadful noise of armies in battle. The eyes covering their surfaces focused intensely on the ascending mystic, evaluating, judging, and determining their fundamental worthiness. Heat radiated from them like colossal furnaces. Their very presence threatened to consume anyone unholy or impure who dared to approach too closely. The mystic was required to withstand this overwhelming scrutiny without the slightest flicker of faltering. Any moral impurity, any unconfessed sin, any hidden wickedness immediately became visible under the gaze of those perfect eyes. The Ophanim saw completely, missing absolutely nothing. They exposed the ascending soul's true nature without mercy or mitigation. Only those found utterly worthy might proceed toward the throne. Those found lacking faced immediate, irrevocable judgment, cast down from the celestial heights they struggled so desperately to reach. One key text, the Greater Haikalot, describes the throne room in overwhelming, meticulous detail. The cherubim stood guard at the four corners. The seraphim surrounded the throne seat itself. And the Ophanim formed the very foundation, their wheels resting upon the crystal sea that spread beneath the throne structure. Fire flowed constantly between all these beings, creating an impenetrable barrier of flame that protected the divine presence from profane intrusion. The mystic who reached this climactic point stood at the culmination of the ascent, beholding what few mortals ever witnessed. Yet, even beholding carried its own dangers. The texts cautioned that staring too long at the Merkaba could cause spiritual blindness or instantaneous incineration. The glory radiating from the throne exceeded human capacity to absorb. The mystic had to maintain perfect, disciplined focus, neither looking away in terror nor staring too directly in sinful presumption. This delicate balance required extraordinary discipline and spiritual fortitude. The Ophanim served another profound role beyond judgment. They participated actively in the celestial liturgy that continuously unfolded around the throne. Their voices joined seamlessly with the seraphim and cherubim in endless, cosmic praise. The mystic who successfully ascended might hear this universal song, understanding for the first time the worship that sustains the entire creation. Some texts even suggested that the mystic joined this liturgy temporarily, adding a singular human voice to the deafening angelic chorus. This participation transformed the practitioner. To stand before the Merkabah, to pass the merciless scrutiny of the Ophanim, and to join the heavenly worship. These experiences marked one as fundamentally changed, elevated, and initiated into mysteries beyond normal human understanding. The mystic returned to earthly existence, but carried the searing vision within, forever shaped by the encounter with ultimate holiness. Not all ascents, however, succeeded. The Haikalot texts meticulously record failed attempts, describing practitioners who approached the throne but could not withstand the reality they encountered. Some saw the Ophanim and fled instantly in terror, unable to endure the penetrating gaze of the eyes. Others approached with foolish overconfidence, lacking proper reverence, and were struck down immediately by the throne's guardians. Still others began the ascent but wisely turned back partway, recognizing their unpreparedness before reaching the final palace. The tradition preserved stories of the great mystics who truly mastered the ascent. Rabbi Akiva stands foremost among them, revered as the one who entered paradise, and returned in peace. His success validated the practice while emphasizing its extreme difficulty. If even 3 out of 4 learned men failed catastrophically, what hope did ordinary practitioners possess? Yet, the tradition persisted, powerfully drawn by the profound transformation that a successful ascent supposedly conferred. The practices often included communal elements. Groups of mystics would gather, supporting one another's terrifying attempts to ascend. They would recite the necessary hymns and names together, creating a focused, sacred space where the mystical experience became more probable. The community provided both practical help, keeping the meditating practitioner safe physically, and essential spiritual support, adding their prayers and intentions to the ascending soul's journey. The Merkabah tradition nonetheless faced considerable opposition from some rabbinic authorities. These established leaders worried deeply about the psychological dangers, the theological presumption involved in attempting such a journey, and the potential for charlatanism. Claiming to have ascended to God's throne conveyed enormous spiritual authority. How could one possibly verify such claims? What prevented false mystics from inventing visions and leading others astray? The explicit warnings found in rabbinic literature reflect these pervasive concerns, attempting to limit Merkabah speculation to only the most highly qualified and mature individuals. Yet, the tradition survived these strictures, passed down through generations of practitioners who steadfastly believed the ascent was both possible and spiritually valuable. The Ophanim remained central to this practice, representing the ultimate, inescapable test of worthiness. Their countless eyes saw truth that could never be hidden. Their position at the throne made them unavoidable for anyone seeking the highest mystical experience. They embodied the terrifying, consuming holiness that must be faced by anyone who dared approach divine glory directly. The physiological effects of these practices also attracted attention, even from skeptical observers. Practitioners commonly reported intense trembling, heavy sweating, and acute feelings of intense heat or cold. Some fell into deep trance or lost consciousness completely. Others claimed to see visions while still partially aware of their physical surroundings. Modern scholars debate whether these represented genuine mystical states, trance conditions induced by meditation and rigorous fasting, or psychosomatic responses to intense expectation and belief. Regardless of academic interpretation, the experiences felt profoundly real to the practitioners. The Ophanim appeared not as theological abstractions but as encountered realities. The eyes seemed to truly see. The wheels actually turned. The fires genuinely burned. The mystic returned from ascent changed, carrying indelible memories of realities that exceeded normal consciousness. The tradition also developed intricate protective measures. Certain specific prayers and divine names supposedly shielded the mystic from direct angelic wrath. Proper timing mattered profoundly. Some texts indicated that ascent should only occur on specific days or during particular prayers. The practitioner's moral and ritual purity required meticulous attention. Any breach, any impurity, any unresolved sin might prove instantly fatal when exposed to the Ophanim's gaze. These strict requirements emphasized that mystical ascent was a matter of extreme danger rather than mere spiritual adventure. The Ophanim did not welcome visitors. They guarded the throne against profane intrusion. Only those properly prepared, properly purified, and properly authorized could pass their terrible scrutiny. The eyes saw everything, evaluated everything, and judged everything. This made them terrifying, awe-inspiring obstacles even for sincere practitioners genuinely seeking divine encounter. The eventual decline of active Merkaba mysticism did not eliminate the tradition's immense influence. Later Kabbalah, emerging prominently in the 12th and 13th centuries, drew heavily upon Merkaba texts and imagery. The Zohar, the central text of Kabbalah, explicitly references the Ophanim and the throne chariot while developing new, complex mystical theologies. The earlier tradition provided the essential foundation for these later developments, ensuring that the Ophanim remained highly relevant in Jewish mystical thought across many centuries. Heavenly hierarchies, the Ophanim and Christian angelology. Christianity inherited the foundational framework of Jewish angelology but inevitably restructured it according to new theological priorities centered on Christ. During the early centuries of Christian development, writers and thinkers adapted existing ideas about angelic orders to fit their developing understanding of Christ's cosmic significance and sovereignty. The Ophanim found their new, formalized place in this reorganized system, identified with the specific order of angels called the thrones and positioned within a comprehensive hierarchy that would shape Christian cosmological thought for well over a millennium. The New Testament provides scattered but foundational references to angelic ranks without systematically organizing them. Paul's letters, as noted, mention thrones, dominions, principalities, powers, and authorities. Colossians 1 famously asserts that all things were created through Christ, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. These terms strongly suggested an existing framework that Paul's audiences would immediately recognize, but the texts offered no clear, explicit explanation of how these ranks interrelated. Early Christian writers soon began the crucial work of organizing these scattered references into coherent systems. This process reflected broader theological concerns regarding Christ's supreme relationship to creation and the precise nature of mediation between the infinite God and fallen humanity. If Christ was indeed supreme over all created beings, establishing the proper order and function of those beings became paramount for demonstrating his preeminence. The crucial systematic development arrived in the late 5th or early 6th century CE with a corpus of texts falsely attributed to Dionysius the Areopagite, supposedly the Athenian converted by Paul in the Book of Acts. Modern scholarship identifies these works as pseudonymous, written by an unknown author now universally called Pseudo-Dionysius. Despite questions regarding authorship, these texts exerted a profound, seismic influence on medieval Christian theology and definitively established the angelic hierarchy that became standard across Western Christianity. Pseudo-Dionysius authored the Celestial Hierarchy, a systematic, meticulous treatise organizing angels into 3 distinct triads, resulting in 9 total orders. The first triad, positioned closest to God, contains the seraphim, the cherubim, and the thrones. The second triad includes the dominions, the virtues, and the powers. The third triad consists of the principalities, archangels, and angels. Each order possesses specific characteristics and functions, with the higher orders mediating divine knowledge and illumination to the lower ones in a beautiful, cascading flow. The explicit identification of the thrones as an angelic order appears clearly in this system. Pseudo-Dionysius drew heavily upon biblical imagery, particularly from Ezekiel and Revelation, to characterize each order. The thrones derive their name and function directly from their purpose. They serve as the mobile seat of divine justice, bearing God's throne and facilitating the execution of divine judgments throughout creation. Their placement in the highest triad reflects their proximity to divine glory and their role in the most intimate aspects of divine governance. The text describes the thrones as exalted, entirely removed from all that is earthly, focused upward toward transcendent divine reality. They possess stability, permanence, and perfect receptivity to the divine presence. Their name indicates their function. They receive God and make His judgments manifest. The powerful imagery of the wheels, the eyes, and the throne-bearing function found in Ezekiel all support this explicit identification. The Ophanim thus became the thrones, the angelic order that most directly participated in divine justice and sovereignty. This systematic Christian framework subtly altered the understanding of the Ophanim. In Jewish mysticism, they remained somewhat mechanical, often viewed as part of the structure of the divine chariot. Christian theology personalized them more fully, treating them as individual angelic beings endowed with consciousness, will, and a personal relationship to God. They served God's purposes not merely as cosmic instruments, but as willing, cognitive participants in divine governance. The Dionysian hierarchy established clear, functional distinctions between the orders of the first triad. The seraphim, whose name means burning ones, focused primarily on the passion of divine love and worship. They burned with absolute, passionate devotion to God, their entire existence consumed by adoration. The cherubim embodied the fullness of knowledge and wisdom. They contemplated divine truth and understood the mysteries of God's nature and purposes. The thrones, derived from the Ophanim, manifested divine justice and judgment. They bore the weight of God's sovereign rule and executed His righteous decisions across all creation. This threefold division of the first triad, love, wisdom, and justice, reflected a comprehensive theological understanding of God's primary attributes. The highest angels embodied these attributes, mediating them to the lower orders and eventually to humanity. The thrones, as bearers of justice, played a crucial, indispensable role in this schema. Without them, divine righteousness remained abstract rather than actively enacted. Medieval theologians elaborated extensively on this framework. Thomas Aquinas, writing in the 13th century, dedicated significant attention to angelic orders in his Summa Theologica. He affirmed the ninefold hierarchy while adding philosophical precision to the distinctions between orders. For Aquinas, angels differed in nature, not merely in function. Their essential being determined their place in the hierarchy, not an arbitrary divine assignment. Aquinas addressed specific questions about the thrones. Did they literally bear God's throne? In what sense could purely spiritual beings serve as seats? He resolved these questions by treating the throne imagery metaphorically while maintaining the profound real distinctions between the angelic orders. The thrones, he argued, received divine illumination concerning justice and judgment. They understood and participated in God's righteous governance in ways that lower angels could not. Their bearing of the throne represented their intimate knowledge of divine justice rather than physical support of a literal seat. This interpretation decisively moved away from the raw, visceral imagery of Ezekiel's vision. The wheels covered in eyes, the intersecting rings, the spirit-driven movement. These concrete, terrifying details became refined, abstract theological concepts. The terrifying, alien holiness of the Ophanim was softened, fitted into rational philosophical categories that ultimately diminished their otherworldliness. Artistic representations reflected this theological tension. Medieval and Renaissance artists depicted angels constantly, creating countless images of celestial beings. The seraphim typically appeared as six-winged figures, often rendered in red or flame-colored light. The cherubim were sometimes shown with multiple faces or heads, referencing Ezekiel's description. But the thrones posed unique challenges for visual representation. How does one paint intersecting wheels covered in eyes in a devotional, comforting manner? How does one render such imagery without making it disturbing or monstrous? Some artists avoided the problem by depicting the thrones as winged elders seated on celestial seats, an approach that drew upon Revelation's 24 elders who sit on thrones around God's throne. This created a manageable, familiar image, but abandoned the specific, unique biblical description of the Ophanim. Other artists attempted more literal renderings, painting wheels with eyes or creating hybrid figures that combined wheels with humanoid forms. These efforts often appeared awkward or confusing, struggling to translate Ezekiel's chaotic vision into medieval aesthetic conventions. The liturgical tradition, particularly in Eastern Orthodoxy, preserved a stronger connection to the biblical imagery. Orthodox hymnography occasionally referenced the thrones using terms closer to Ezekiel's original vision, maintaining the sense of profound strangeness that Western scholastic theology tended to domesticate. Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy provides perhaps the most influential medieval literary treatment of the angelic hierarchy. In Paradiso, the poet ascends through the celestial spheres, encountering the angelic orders at each level. The thrones appear in the heaven of Saturn, the sphere where the spirits of contemplatives dwell. Dante describes them as reflecting divine judgment, radiating intense light that represents the justice of God flowing perfectly through creation. His presentation followed Pseudo-Dionysius closely, embedding the ninefold hierarchy into a sweeping cosmic vision that shaped the Western imagination for centuries. The Protestant reformers questioned some aspects of medieval angelology, while fundamentally maintaining belief in the existence of angelic beings. They generally rejected the elaborate speculation about angelic hierarchies as unbiblical, arguing that Scripture provided little clear information about such precise details. The specific identification of the Ophanim with the thrones, or of seraphim and cherubim with particular functions, struck some reformers as reading far too much into limited biblical evidence. Yet, the basic framework persisted even in Protestant thought. Angels exist. They serve God in various ways. Some rank higher than others based on their proximity to divine glory and the importance of their assigned tasks. The specific ninefold hierarchy might be debated, but the general principle of organized angelic orders remained accepted. The Ophanim thus retained their place in the broader Christian imagination, even if their exact classification and function became matters of theological debate rather than settled dogma. Modern Christian theology shows considerably less interest in detailed angelology. The focus has shifted overwhelmingly toward Christ's work of redemption, the Church's mission, and practical Christian living. Angels appear primarily in Christmas narratives and occasional discussions of spiritual warfare. The elaborate, systematic hierarchies that so fascinated medieval thinkers receive almost no attention in contemporary preaching or teaching. The Ophanim specifically have faded almost completely from modern Christian consciousness, remembered only by those who specialize in biblical symbolism or historical theology. Yet, their influence endures in subtle, powerful ways. The enduring image of divine justice watching everything through countless eyes, of God's throne dynamically moving throughout creation, of a judgment that sees and knows all truth, these fundamental concepts, rooted in Ezekiel's vision of the wheels, shaped Christian understanding of divine providence and human accountability. The Ophanim may not be named explicitly in sermons today, but the theology they represent, perfect, mobile, inescapable justice, continues to inform Christian belief about God's governance of creation and the certainty of ultimate righteousness. Modern terror and the reverence for the unseen, from UFOs to AI and pop culture. The 20th century witnessed a truly unexpected resurgence of fascination with the Ophanim, a revival not catalyzed by renewed religious fervor or dedicated mystical practice, but rather by the speculative frontier of technology and the pervasive influence of popular culture. As humanity relentlessly engineered new capabilities and found itself grappling with profound, new existential dilemmas, the ancient, mind-bending vision of colossal wheels covered in countless, luminous eyes suddenly achieved a chilling contemporary relevance. The Ophanim, the whirling thrones of God, were forcefully pulled back into the public consciousness, reinvented as central elements of UFO theories, potent symbols of nascent artificial intelligence, and terrifying muses for modern horror and science fiction. Their inherent biblical strangeness resonated deeply with modern anxieties in ways their original audience, confined by an ancient cosmology, could never have possibly foreseen. The initial seismic connection to unidentified flying objects solidified in the 1960s and 1970s, precisely when the ancient astronaut theory, the notion that deities were merely misunderstood visitors from space, captured the global imagination. Influential figures like Erich von Däniken brazenly posited that many religious narratives, including the revered texts of the Bible, were nothing less than garbled, pre-scientific accounts of encounters with advanced extraterrestrial beings, whom primitive humans mistakenly worshipped as gods or angels. Ezekiel's magnificent, chaotic vision became a primary exhibit in this radical framework. The description of immense, intersecting wheels, accompanied by fire and characterized by ascending and descending motions, appeared to technologically oriented minds to be a perfect description of a complex spacecraft rather than a divine chariot of glory. Von Daniken's seminal 1968 bestseller, Chariots of the Gods, specifically dissected Ezekiel chapter 1, arguing for its interpretation as a detailed, if confused, description of a technological landing event. The perplexing intersecting wheels were smoothly recast as rotating components of an alien propulsion system. The multitude of eyes were pragmatically reinterpreted as viewing ports, windows, or perhaps navigational lights, and the fire represented the powerful thrust of rocket propulsion. Even the creatures with multiple faces were explained away as astronauts confined within complex, multifunctional helmets or sophisticated robotic assistants. The entire transcendent vision was thus brutally secularized and reinterpreted as a purely technological encounter, fundamentally misunderstood by a pre-scientific observer who simply lacked the requisite conceptual vocabulary to recognize the advanced engineering before him. This revolutionary theory generated colossal popular interest, even as it faced swift and total rejection from academic theologians and historians. Perhaps most strikingly, NASA engineer Joseph Blumrich published The Spaceships of Ezekiel in 1974, dedicating the work to reconstructing the alleged craft's technical specifications based meticulously on the biblical text. He theorized that the wheels were designed to function as helicopter-like rotors, proposing that the unique, intersecting geometry facilitated stable hovering and multidirectional travel, thereby representing a plausible, if exotic, spacecraft design. His professional engineering credentials provided an initial, deceptive veneer of credibility to the interpretation, though critics rightfully noted that Blumrich started with the non-negotiable assumption that Ezekiel had described technology, and worked backward to force the biblical details into a compatible engineering framework. The ancient astronaut interpretation performs a profound surgery. It completely strips away the theological meaning of the Ophanim while chillingly preserving their inherent sense of terror. Instead of divine judgment, the countless eyes now signify ruthless surveillance equipment. Instead of spiritual omniscience, they represent cold, advanced monitoring technology. And instead of holiness, they suggest overwhelming alien superiority. The Ophanim remain terrifying within this cold, materialistic framework, but for entirely different secular reasons, not because they embody righteous divine justice, but because they manifest technological advancement far exceeding human comprehension and control. This secular reinterpretation inadvertently illuminates a critical truth about the original vision. Its intrinsic power does not rely solely upon its theological context. The raw image itself is profoundly disturbing. Wheels that move in impossible, non-Euclidean ways. An overwhelming profusion of watching eyes. The disorienting, unsettling fusion of mechanical precision and organic sentience. Whether we choose to categorize these entities as angels or as extraterrestrials, they violently transgress our most fundamental expectations about how structure and function ought to operate in the universe. The deep discomfort they generate operates at a foundational level, far deeper than any specific religious or technological explanation. The meteoric rise of artificial intelligence and widespread anxiety over pervasive, total surveillance have injected fresh, urgent relevance into the Ophanim mythos. In the early 21st century, as high-resolution cameras proliferate across every urban landscape, as sophisticated algorithms meticulously track every flicker of online behavior, and as facial recognition systems identify individuals seamlessly within mass crowds, the ancient image of countless eyes watching everything suddenly feels less archaic and far more prophetic. The Ophanim now prefigure a world where observation becomes total and non-negotiable, where absolutely nothing escapes monitoring, and where the sacred human right to privacy dissolves entirely under the glare of comprehensive surveillance. This stark connection surfaces recurrently in contemporary discourse surrounding AI. The Ophanim are cited as representing one potential chilling future, a reality where machine intelligence silently observes all human activity, processes that monumental flow of information according to programmed, unyielding parameters, and executes judgments or consequences based entirely on its perfect recorded perception. The biblical eyes morph seamlessly into interconnected cameras and sensors. The spirit ruach that impels the wheels is now reimagined as the algorithm, the complex, self-learning code that processes the data. And the divine throne is materialized as the vast server infrastructure that houses and directs these all-seeing systems. Biblical imagery merges perfectly with technological anxiety, creating a disturbing validation. Both the Ophanim and advanced AI systems share defining characteristics that fundamentally challenge human comfort. Both entities observe continuously, operating without need for rest or distraction. Both process staggering volumes of information strictly according to complex rules that humans, particularly their users, may never fully comprehend. Both occupy an unnerving hybrid position, caught between a simple tool and a terrifyingly sentient being, serving specific purposes while simultaneously possessing capacities that far exceed mere instruments. Both generate existential dread precisely because they possess the capacity to see us, our intentions, our flaws, our patterns, far more clearly than we see ourselves. Pop culture has embraced the Ophanim with rapturous enthusiasm. The image of the celestial wheels surfaces in video games, graphic novels, anime, and high-concept horror stories, almost invariably emphasized for their terrifying, alien, and cognitively dissonant qualities. Artists and creators are rediscovering the original biblical description and immediately recognizing its immense potential for generating genuine, visceral unease. The plethora of multiple eyes, the impossible geometry that defies visual logic, and the sense of a colossal, utterly alien intelligence residing behind an inhuman form, all these elements are perfectly suited for modern horror and science fiction narrative architecture. The viral trend of biblically accurate angels that surged across social media platforms, particularly during the late 2010s and early 2020s, brought intense, renewed scrutiny to the Ophanim. Artists consciously moved away from the sanitized, humanist depiction of angels prevalent in traditional religious art, instead creating visualizations drawn directly from Scripture. The resultant contrast was both shocking and profoundly disturbing. Rather than encountering ethereal, handsome humans with gentle wings, viewers were confronted with immense wheels covered in eyes, beings sporting multiple, conflicting faces, and complex structures that defied normal spatial perception. The Ophanim figured prominently in these viral depictions, their innate strangeness perfectly designed to shatter comfortable, familiar assumptions about divine messengers. This trend clearly exposed a contemporary cultural hunger for the genuinely alien, for images that could provoke authentic cognitive dissonance and unease, rather than merely familiar, comforting fright. Horror fiction has unfortunately trained its audiences to anticipate certain tropes. Monsters with sharp teeth and claws, specters in abandoned manors, demons with horns and tails. These repetitive images have become comforting through their sheer predictability. But the Ophanim offer an entirely different threat, something that feels conceptually alien rather than merely monstrous, existentially disturbing rather than simply scary. Video games, recognizing this, have utilized the Ophanim as direct inspiration for boss creatures and cosmic horror entities. The intricate geometric design translates remarkably well into digital rendering, enabling programmers to construct enemies that move with unsettling, unnatural fluidity and that overwhelm players with the pervasive sensation of being watched from every possible angle simultaneously. Games like Bayonetta feature explicit, detailed references to the angelic hierarchies, often including the thrones, Ophanim*, rendered as gigantic golden wheels covered in wings and eyes. These digital recreations transform the ancient vision into an interactive nightmare, allowing players to directly experience approaching and engaging in battle with beings inspired by Ezekiel's frightening text. Anime and manga, especially works exploring deep religious or mystical themes, have frequently borrowed from the Ophanim for visual design inspiration. Series like Neon Genesis Evangelion feature powerful entities called angels that bear minimal resemblance to traditional Western angel iconography but pointedly incorporate elements directly sourced from biblical descriptions of celestial beings. While not always explicitly labeled as Ophanim, some designs clearly reference the wheel within a wheel motif and the recurring pattern of multiple, all-seeing eyes from Ezekiel's terrifying vision. The horror genre specifically has found the Ophanim invaluable for structuring cosmic horror narratives in the chilling tradition established by H.P. Lovecraft. These stories emphasize the Ophanim as incomprehensible, fundamentally alien entities whose very existence threatens the stability of human sanity. The Ophanim fit naturally into this specific framework. They demonstrably possess profound intelligence and definite purpose, yet they operate according to a logic that is fundamentally foreign to human understanding. They watch and they judge based on standards that humanity cannot possibly grasp. They embody a type of consciousness so utterly distinct from our own that merely encountering it risks psychological breakdown. This modern, secular interpretation of horror inadvertently recovers a profound truth embedded in the original biblical context. The Merkaba mystics of old explicitly warned that unprepared practitioners risked going utterly mad from witnessing the sheer magnitude of the throne and its terrifying guardians. The rabbinic cautions against publicly studying Ezekiel chapter 1 reflected a genuine, pragmatic concern about psychological trauma. The intense terror the Ophanim inspired in ancient audiences stemmed partly from this chilling recognition. Some realities simply exceed the human capacity to process safely. Modern cosmic horror rediscovers this boundary condition without necessarily accepting its original theological explanation. The contemporary post-human discourse and philosophy also recognize the profound relevance of the Ophanim. As thinkers speculate about future possibilities where human consciousness and machine intelligence merge, where the lines between biological and artificial intelligence irreversibly blur, the biblical wheels offer a compelling ancient precedent for beings that utterly transcend simple categories. The Ophanim operate according to spirit, ruach*, yet function with mechanical precision. They possess a form of consciousness yet serve as indispensable components of a much vaster, complex structure. They exist precisely at the intersection of multiple ontological categories, vehemently refusing to fit neatly into human assumptions about the very nature of being. Transhumanist writers occasionally reference the Ophanim when hypothesizing about the potential evolution of intelligence beyond purely biological constraints. What might awareness become when radically freed from the limitations of the organic, fragile brain? The wheels propose one terrifying possibility: awareness distributed across a complex, kinetic structure, perceiving reality from countless perspectives simultaneously, driven by pure, abstract purpose, rather than confined by physical or metabolic necessities. The eyes represent not individual sensory organs, but a unified, total field of perception that instantaneously grasps everything within its operational range. Even the environmental movement has, on occasion, subtly adopted Ophanim imagery to represent nature's comprehensive, interconnected awareness. The countless, unblinking eyes suggest that every single action we take against the planet is observed and meticulously recorded. The movement of the wheels in all directions implies that environmental damage cannot be hidden or isolated. What we do in one remote place inevitably affects conditions everywhere. The throne above the wheels represents not divine judgment in the religious sense, but natural consequence. The inevitable, impartial results that follow from treating creation with careless abandon. Religious communities have responded with varied reactions to this extensive cultural revival. Some welcome the renewed attention paid to biblical imagery, viewing it as a valuable opportunity to initiate discussions about Scripture with audiences who might otherwise ignore it entirely. Others express deep concern that pop culture treatments inevitably trivialize or grotesquely distort profound religious truths, thereby reducing complex theological concepts to mere entertainment spectacle. This tension perfectly reflects broader, ongoing questions about how sacred texts and venerable traditions can successfully engage with the dynamic, often irreverent currents of secular culture. The Ophanim also play a central role in discussions surrounding surveillance capitalism and the aggressive collection of data. Tech giants accumulate staggering amounts of granular information about human behavior, tracking purchases, physical movements, communications, and preferences with terrifying accuracy. They then process this deluge of data through proprietary algorithms that identify subtle patterns and make accurate, often predictive, decisions. This vast system sees everything users do within its domain and utilizes that omniscient knowledge for purposes the users often do not fully understand or control. The parallel to countless eyes observing all and reporting back to a central, remote throne seems both obvious and deeply troubling. Privacy advocates frequently reference the Ophanim when arguing against the relentless expansion of comprehensive surveillance. They point to the biblical vision as a powerful, ancient warning about the inevitable harm that total observation inflicts upon human freedom and dignity. When absolutely nothing remains private, when all behavior is conducted under a watchful, unblinking gaze, human beings fundamentally change. They begin to self-censor. They conform to expectations. They lose the vital internal space necessary for the development of authentic selfhood. The Ophanim, whether conceptualized as angels or as symbols of vast surveillance networks, embody this direct threat to human autonomy. Yet, others draw profound comfort from this very same imagery. If God truly sees everything, if the divine eyes truly miss nothing, then hidden injustice, exploitation, and abuse cannot possibly escape eventual judgment. The powerful cannot conceal their abuses. The wealthy cannot hide their exploitation. Victims whose suffering goes entirely unnoticed by fallible human authorities can take immense solace in the belief that divine attention records every wrong inflicted upon them. The Ophanim promise eventual, inescapable accountability, guaranteeing that what happens in darkness will inevitably be brought into the blinding light. This dual response, terror and comfort, has always been the defining characteristic of human reactions to comprehensive divine knowledge. The very omniscience that threatens the wicked simultaneously reassures and validates the righteous. The eyes that ruthlessly expose hidden sin also bear witness to hidden virtue. The judgment that terrifies those burdened with guilty consciences offers profound hope to those desperately seeking justice. The Ophanim embody this very complexity, remaining simultaneously frightening and deeply comforting, depending entirely on one's relationship to the ultimate throne they faithfully serve. The modern cultural resurgence of interest in the Ophanim strongly suggests they fulfill a vital, powerful need within the contemporary consciousness. We find ourselves living in a dizzying age of transition, perpetually caught between familiar, comfortable human scales of existence and emerging realities we desperately struggle to comprehend. Artificial intelligence, pervasive global surveillance, the threat of environmental collapse, and exponential technological transformation. These colossal forces operate at levels that completely exceed individual understanding while simultaneously affecting every minute aspect of daily life. We urgently require appropriate imagery for this overwhelming experience. We need powerful symbols that capture the acute sensation of being observed, judged, and acted upon by immense, anonymous systems utterly beyond our control. The Ophanim provide precisely such imagery. They have always represented forces larger than the human scale, awareness more comprehensive than human perception, and judgment more certain than human justice. Whether we interpret them as angels, aliens, AI systems, or symbols of natural consequence, they perform the identical critical cultural work. They render visible the invisible forces that ceaselessly shape our existence, giving concrete, terrifying form to the feeling of being seen by something that sees far, far more clearly than we see ourselves. Their deep biblical origin ensures they carry a weight and authority that purely modern imagery simply lacks. They connect our most contemporary, technological anxieties to ancient spiritual wisdom, suggesting that humans have always wrestled with these fundamental questions about observation, judgment, and the fraught relationship between the seen and the unseen worlds. The specific technologies change, but the underlying concerns persist across millennia. What watches us? What knows us intimately? What judges our conduct? To what ultimate power are we truly accountable? The Ophanim remain, after more than 2.5 millennia, the Bible's most terrifying and resonant beings, because they uniquely combine the utterly alien with the intensely intimate. They appear totally foreign to human form and function, geometrical, mechanical, impossible. Yet, they operate in the most personal space imaginable, the space of being perfectly, inescapably known. They successfully bridge the gap between cosmic scale and individual significance. They prove that what seems distant and abstract can suddenly become terrifyingly immediate and concrete. They demonstrate that the machinery of divine presence, or cosmic justice, or technological surveillance, or natural law, can arrive anywhere, see absolutely everything, and miss nothing at all. This specific terror carries no simple, comforting resolution. We cannot cease being seen. We cannot escape the multitude of eyes. We cannot successfully hide from what knows us completely. The Ophanim teach this lesson relentlessly. Transparency is not an option. Accountability is not escapable. Judgment is not avoidable. Whether the eyes belong to celestial angels, complex algorithms, or nature itself matters far less than recognizing their fundamental, unyielding function. They watch. They know. They report to powers that act decisively on what they reveal. And the wheels turn. The eyes never close. The watching continues. The Ophanim roll on through all creation, carrying the throne that judges all things, seeing everything, missing nothing, making every last hidden thing visible under their countless, unblinking gaze.